process. It's very multifaceted, and you definitely have to work on multiple things at once. And so I just put it in kind of an order, but it's not the solution that would work for everybody, but hopefully all of the pieces that you'll need to work on to get started on your agency's plan are going to be covered today. So we'll go ahead and flip to the first slide that has a question on it. Nicole, if you're still, oh, next slide. Thanks. Why does your agency program need a strategic plan? I get asked this a lot. Big Brothers Big Sisters of America has actually made this a requirement for all Big Brothers Big Sisters affiliates nationwide. And when people ask me this, like, you know, why do we have to like spend all this time using it? We already know what we're doing. I liken it to the next slide, which is that improv isn't always great, and I think I'm hilarious, but I'm really bad at telling jokes too, and that analogy. And with a strategic plan, at least you have direction. You're not just you know, winging it all the time. So Nicole, if you just want to move forward now 2 slides. A strategic plan will answer for us, where are we now, and then where do we want to be, and then how will we get there? So those are the 3 basic pieces of a strategic plan. You're focusing on reality, you're focusing on like ideally where you want to be, and then how are you going to get there with the resources that you have now or the resources that you could put together moving forward. So our first questions for the group on the next slide are, who should be involved in helping to create the strategic plan, and who should actually write the plan? So for those of you, I see some of you aren't muted, so it sounds like you guys have really good, like there's no feedback for you. So if you guys want to take a chance at, or try to answer that question for us. So who should be involved in helping to create it, and then who should actually physically write the plan? I see Tony Leo, I see Val, I see Lynn Carroll, David, not all at once. All right, well, I can't hear anyone talking, so hopefully you can still hear me talking. But for my perspective, when I think about who is working on the strategic plan for Big Brothers Big Sisters, we came up with a couple of different options. So we had broken into who should take the lead in creating a strategic plan for your program or your agency, and then who should be involved in giving feedback for your program and agency strategic plan. So on the next slide, for who should take the lead, some of the considerations that I think all of us have, regardless of size or designation. I know some of us on the phone are independent agencies, and then some of us are part of a school district or another sponsored organization. You're just an arm of them. So I think for all of us, I think hopefully these solutions will be transferable. So board members or advisory council members, that's certainly a group. Big Brothers Big Sisters of America really encourages all of the local affiliates to have the board members take the lead in creating the agencies and affiliates our program strategic plans. CEO and staff, that's certainly an option. Also, some organizations might choose volunteers or their mentors, or if you're supported by a school district, maybe another school staff member, so you as a staff member can just really take a back seat and be part of the contributing aspect and let somebody else lead and navigate and be kind of a third party to the process. And also just an outside consultant. I know some affiliates have had a lot of luck using them. I personally never have. The agencies I worked with have always picked either board members or myself, or a combination usually of both of us to do it. And then I think outside consultants have been really strong when board members and staff members have the resources to coach them and really guide them through the process. I know that some affiliates that I've worked with just on a peer-to-peer support network didn't really have good luck using consultants, but that's because they didn't really spend the time and invest in them and give them like all the information that they would have needed to be successful at facilitating the process, and then also putting together a plan that worked for the agency. For the next slide, deciding who should be involved in the process. Again, a lot of the same people on the first page for who should take the lead: board members, advisory council members, CEO, staff. volunteers, mentors, also funders. Big Brothers Big Sisters of Northeast Iowa has involved them this time. 3 years ago, we did just for our top 5 funders, but this time around, now that we're really looking forward and really need a lot of support to do all that we want to do in the next 5 years, we've involved all of our funders and give them the option of participating. Program champions, which I would define as anybody that's supportive or supportive of your program. So it could be school partners, could be corporate partners in your community. It could be people that come to your fundraising events, or maybe you do recruitment events where you'll utilize volunteers or restaurants or hosts for your events. Anybody that really champions your program. And then program participants, so mentors, mentees. I'll probably slip out bigs and littles just because I work for Big Brothers Big Sisters agency. So mentors, mentees. So apologies in advance if I do the rest of the presentation. Families. So there's a lot of people that certainly could give feedback and could also be helpful in this process. Anyone listening, did you engage anyone else as you've done your strategic plans in the past, or have you considered, for those of you who have never done it yet, other people that I haven't mentioned that you'd want to include? Ooh, are people chatting? Let me see if I can read this. Okay, so David shares, get as many different aspects as you can when planning. And Tony Leo says, I'd say a few select staff and board members at the minimum should be involved. Definitely agree. All right, thanks for sharing that. And now I know how to read the chat. Thanks for using that. All right, so as we move on, the next, oop, is somebody talking? I'm sorry, does someone have a question? Okay, sorry, I think I'm just hearing feedback. All right, so the next step, once you've kind of assembled your team and have really identified roles and who's going to be driving the pace, who's going to be taking the lead and facilitating, versus who's going to be an active participant and contributor, it's really important to understand like where you're even going. So my agency, as well as the other Big Brothers Big Sisters, we all have our vision and mission. Our national office has established for us with all of our input. And our vision is that all children achieve success in life. So super basic, super simple, very memorable. And when my agency thinks about that vision, I mean, all affiliates can definitely interpret it their own way. But all children achieving success in life as a vision for us, we are assigned 17 counties by our national office. And when I arrived to Iowa 3 years ago, we were only serving 2 of them. So our strategic planning process is definitely focused on increasing our services and enhancing our quality and continue to do what we're doing and maintaining. But also we're really interested in growing our services because we read that vision as that all children achieve success in life. It shouldn't matter, the geographic location that they're in. If they need a mentor, they need a mentor. So our vision has helped us guide us in our strategic plan. Other agencies, your programs, I'm assuming all have visions as well. So remembering that and making that really the backbone of your strategic plan. And if you're thinking to yourself, I don't really know what my vision is, or my agency or my program's vision is, or our vision's a little outdated, we've kind of moved away from it, that might be a really great place to start before you get into the planning process, because you kind of need to know your destination before you start out, unless, if improv works for you, like the beginning. I guess it's a good approach too. But definitely understanding what your agency's program and vision is and making sure all involved in the planning process are definitely aware of that too and have that perspective. Another great piece that you'll want to kind of identify before you get too far underway is the time frame that you want the plan to cover. So I mentioned that when I started in Northeast Iowa, we created a 3-year plan just to get us through kind of a short-term period for us. My agency didn't really have an updated plan before I arrived. The last time they had created one was in 2011, and they shelved it, meaning they spent so much time on it and then never looked at it again. So I think a lot of agencies are guilty of doing that. I certainly was. As a first-time leader 8 years ago, I did the same thing. When we created the strategic plan at my agency, I was the program director then, and it wasn't really ingrained in our staff meetings before I arrived, and as a new leader, I didn't realize I should be doing that. So it wasn't until my opportunity to actually lead an agency when I realized the right way to do it. So coming up with the time frame, and then also like remembering to incorporate it every step of the way. So I know some agencies do like 1 year plans, like short-term goals, short-term plans, and that certainly works for them. 3 year plans, 5 year plan is what my agency is working towards now. I've even heard of some agencies doing 7 or 10 year plans, or programs doing 7 or 10 year plans. I know that my leadership style would not be a good fit for a 10 year plan because while strategic plans are supposed to kind of be flexible and fluid, I don't know if I know where I even see my agency in 10 years aside from just like being great. I don't know. I don't know. So I'd be curious to hear if anyone on the phone, if your agency or program has or is considering doing a longer plan, and maybe, or if you currently have a really long-term plan, what benefits you've seen. So would anyone like to contribute or chat, just talking about that? Or if your agency or program already has an existing plan, the length of yours, just so we can kind of take a pulse of the room to see if there's like a trend in Iowa for mentoring programs. So I'll take a breath, see if anyone wants to enter anything in the chat box or share if you're able. Oops, all right, let's see. All right, so one program's working on a 3 year plan. Anybody else? 3. Thanks, Regina. Lori says 3. Okay, so I'm seeing a common theme. Great. All right. Well, again, if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat box at any time, or I think everyone that has a green microphone that I can see is unmuted, so don't be afraid to share. So another step that you'll need to do before getting too far underway in your planning process is getting your data ready and really understanding what your program or your agency's current reality is. Let's see, I think it's been a month now. We, at Big Brothers Big Sisters of Northeast Iowa, had a board meeting, and it was really the first, maybe it's been a couple months, it was our first conversation really targeted around growth, like our vision is growing. So the board members' questions all revolved around our current status. Every month they already get what we call a program scorecard, so they already have the basic information. But they were asking really great questions about all the different programs that we offer and which ones are the most beneficial to youth. And we had a really great conversation about our school-based model versus our community-based model. Roughly, they're serving the same amount of youth now, but 2 years ago, our community-based program was much larger by 200 kids larger, but now we've kind of balanced out. So really, they ask a lot of questions around quantity versus quality and impact, and if one program had higher impact than the other. And being able to pull out that data and really provide them with accurate information that they need was really helpful. We also have another program called Read to Succeed, which has been an outstanding model. Our funders love it. So naturally, we're inclined to continue to grow it, especially because we are seeing the impact. But the program doesn't have the numbers that our community and school-based models do. So our board had a really great conversation around quantity versus quality and impact. If our Read to Succeed program only has 60 kids in it, but all of them have higher impact than, say, the traditional school-based model, where we have triple the amount of children in, and their impact scores are a little bit lower. Like, does it matter? Like, would we cut the Read to Succeed program to try to grow our school-based program because it's catching on more, or would we try to direct more of our school-based youth to Read to Succeed because we're seeing higher impact? So that conversation was amazing. But if we didn't have the data at our hands, like, we would just be going blind. So it's really helpful if your agency already is tracking things like program numbers, program quality. I think most of us, are doing impact surveys, so really knowing and understanding that data and making it available in a way that's easy for board members to understand, or the people that are working with your plan to understand. Board performance and staff performance, understanding if you're having some turnover in your key volunteer roles, understanding the mentor's impact and the youth and family impact that your program's having on them or they're having on each other. So just really getting that all together and being able to present it, I think, is really helpful. And it helps you also identify your reality. For those of you who have done this before, you know that as you're talking about your future, you will always have people in the room mention things that are like way farther than maybe your agency's reality is at the moment. And then you'll have some people like maybe contribute ideas that are kind of taking your agency a step in a backwards direction, or they're so unambitious their agency would accomplish the goals probably in a week or a month. So I think that really helps to guide the conversation and understand where you could go. All right, so let me just check chat. Okay, so Val shared that she has a 3-year plan too. All right, so next part of the process, you have everything ready. You've identified who's going to help you. You know your vision and where you'd like to go. A lot of programs and agencies would then start doing an analysis, would then start to have guided conversations with everyone involved in the process, the discovery process, the thinking process about where you'd want your plan to go. I think all of us maybe know what SWOT analysis is. If you don't, SWOT, S-W-O-T, stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. This is a really great tool that a lot of folks are familiar with across the business world to help you identify the pieces that will be most needed to know for your plan as you're moving forward. So a SWOT analysis, I've seen programs just design a little chart, like dividing it like into quadrants, into 4 little squares, and just having people list out like what are your agency or program strengths, what are your weaknesses, what opportunities do you have that you haven't yet seized, and then any threats or competition, or what would go under this category too would be funding, like unknowns there. So just really laying it out, and that really has helped some people as they're getting started in this process identify some patterns, or maybe some folks have come up with things that you never thought of yourself as the agency leader or the person guiding your agency through this. I think a great question to start at, if this is your first time doing it with your group, is why are we important to our community and what do we do best? I think obviously focus on strengths first before you take a deeper dive. A lot of folks, when they've done this process, they have commented that sometimes it's easier, unfortunately, for people to think of the weaknesses or the negatives first. And that's, while it's helpful, you really do need to focus on strengths too and try to find that balance, because that could unintentionally take you off course if you're focusing on the weaknesses too much, or even the threats too much. Try to focus on the strengths. For, again, involvement on who to survey or who to ask these questions to, you'll want to include staff and board members, advisory councils. We now are actually also, I mentioned that earlier, our first plan that we did when I arrived, we included some donors. Now we're including them all. We actually didn't survey mentors unless they were already a donor or a board member or staff member by default. But this time we also are surveying mentors, and we're asking them some questions, and I'll share some that we're using in a minute. And then also youth. Your youth are really important. You might need to frame your questions differently, and you might not be able to give them like a piece of paper and have them fill it out for you. But in our match support, it's a really great opportunity to be asking kids in our program, what are we doing great for you? What do you like best about our program? What do you think we could be doing a better job at? Just things like that. And you might be surprised of what the youth in our program who are being impacted might say, and as well as their families. Big brothers, big sisters, we put together a couple of surveys that we've sent out either in paper form, or we've used them to guide conversations in board meetings, advisory council meetings, and meetings with our funders. And then we also created a Google form survey that we were able to send out to our donors and our program participants and champions through our newsletters. And Nicole, if you want to skip ahead to a couple of slides, you'll see it says program. Yep, right there. So we tried to break out the questions, kind of using the SWOT analysis structure, but making the questions work for us and kind of the information that we're most interested in learning more about. So we divided it into program, staffing, county development and expansion, resource development, and then we also had another section for board development. So in the program section, some of the questions that we came up with to ask folks, survey folks, about which current program service is the most beneficial, what is the least beneficial that out of the programs that we offer, what would you do to improve it, what new program areas or services would you like the agency to explore. And one of our goals in our current strategic plan that we have been measuring and tracking for the previous 3 years to present is definitely diversity and mentors. We do a great job with diversity in youth. For Northeast Iowa, we've actually managed to figure out a way to recruit more youth that are not Caucasian than youth that are. So we're pretty proud of ourselves that we've been able to diversify the mentees, but our mentors we can still count on two hands, the ones that aren't Caucasian. So we know we need to be doing better. So when we're surveying all of our program champions, we definitely asked some questions around that. So what can we do better? And then what should we stop doing in terms of like our recruitment practices and why? So just trying to get some information around that and and figuring that out. On the next slide, there are some questions that we asked around staffing, and these questions were asked to our staff. On the other surveys, we still had this section, but we changed the format of the questions around to make it make more sense for the person that was taking it. So for the staff, we asked how's the agency utilizing your strengths? Are we utilizing them well? Your education and training, your prior work experience to effectively provide services for children and youth. Another question: what strengths could you offer to support the agency that are currently not being used? And what staff training and development needs would you suggest to build and support a strong workforce? So, asking questions around there. For our board members, we actually the slides later, never mind, skip that part. Community development and expansion, we'll get to what we asked the board members in a minute about their strengths and skills. But the next slide, community development and expansion, we asked how we're currently doing with visibility, provision of services, and resource development in our current service area. What should we be doing differently in our current service area to strengthen our efforts? And then should we expand our service area into other counties? If yes, where? We were interested in hearing the answer for this question specifically from our donors and our current bigs. They all know that we've grown tremendously over the past 2.5 years. 2.5 years ago, we were serving 160 kids. Now we've grown our program capacity to serve 580 kids. That's a lot, and we were afraid that people would stop believing in us because, growing that fast, people might feel that we're not doing so sustainably. So we have only seen great responses to this question so far, so fingers crossed, and people want us to keep expanding. Because they know that the need is so high in our area, and they know that's what we're trying to do, that they know that's our vision. So that's just been reaffirming. And if we did receive negative responses or just saying like, no, you guys need to quit it, just maintain, you're not doing well, we would definitely listen. So we wouldn't try to grow knowing that that's what people's perceptions are. But for now, our program quality is still high. Our youth impact is higher than it's been. So we have that data plus the perceptions of our folks, our program champions has been helpful. For resource development, that area, some of the questions that we came up with are, what is the most effective way to recruit volunteers? And what should we do differently or additionally to raise funds and expand agency program awareness? We asked that question to our funders too, and I am in love that some of them actually shared other foundations that I've never even heard of, or just had such great advice for us. And I've learned in Iowa that funders are just so nice, and they're not protective of their own foundation or trust or entity at all. They want us to do well. They want to make sure that their investment is going to do well, and they know that they can't fully fund our program themselves, and they just have been so willing, at least in Northeast Iowa, to share additional resources or thoughts around even different events, that used to happen and don't anymore because another nonprofit did it. Maybe we consider doing it, to build in that area. So we've gotten great feedback from that one. We're glad that we didn't just ask that one to staff and board like we had originally considered. So I'm going to take a breath and ask, before I jump to another slide with questions about board, we asked board members additional questions. So questions for the group. And this actually came from the peer sharing page, and person on the call actually asked this. So I thought it was a really great question. I had no idea how to answer him. So what do you guys think? How much input into programming in terms of the strategic plan and developing your next 3 years should board members have? And then on the opposite side of things, how much input into fund development should program staff members who aren't primarily responsible for that piece have? So I'm going to pause a little bit, and we'll see if anyone wants to share out loud responses to that, or if you want to take a second and maybe type
it should be
comments.
that, yes, and then BB is not going in? So it's disabled. Oh, all right, let me go back into it.
I can hear someone, but they're not sharing the answer. All right, anyone's thoughts? Anyone about how much input into programming should board members have, and then how much input into fund development should program staff members have? Any thoughts?
Like the parent or the site. Well,
I hear one person typing. Well, when I was trying to figure out what the answer is, I thought immediately back to a board conversation again, where our program staff and we had our event staff there too, and we were talking about programming thoughts and where they thought we should go in 5 years. And the very first question that a board member who's been on our board for 5.5 years, her term's almost up, so she's been around the block. She's not been a big mentor herself, but she's been to everything that our agency's offered and more, and she's been to a lot of match activities just to check them out and be supportive. So out of all of our board members, I would feel like she would be the one that would know the most about our programs. And her very first question when we were asking, what programs do you like the best? What programs do you think we need to get away from or do better? And she said, well, tell us more about the programs because I don't really know that much about them. And I thought that was really eye-opening. And we all just kind of took a step back and we just, went over, okay, community-based, we offer school-based. We went through all the programs again. And that's it. We don't, our programs are pretty simple. We don't try to get too complex. We know that mentoring works without adding a lot of bells and whistles, just the consistency and we all know this. So I thought that was really interesting, and our board did take the conversation did take a turn, and they were considering having us stop recruiting refugee youth. There's another program in Waterloo who has started up. Actually, they've been doing mentoring for a while. They're just newly certified, and so if they're doing a mentoring program that works specifically with refugee youth, why should we too? But we talked a little bit about how we can certainly partner and work together, but we're not exclusive of any groups. So if a board, if board conversation goes that way, if you have the data and the why behind it, I think that's fine. I think that it would be hard if the board was the only group that was involved in strategic planning. I think like as a control freak, just my own leadership style, I don't know if I would be able to handle that. I want as many people involved as possible, not just them. So I think that would be hard. So I guess just, if it doesn't feel right or if it feels like your board is just making decisions that aren't taking into consideration reality or your actual program participants, I think that would be a problem. But I think keeping them in the conversation and we never really have our board members alone when we have these conversations. There's always program staff members there to provide context. So I think that certainly helped us too. And then on the flip side, the second question, how much input into fund development should program staff members have? We at Big Brothers Big Sisters of Northeast Iowa have really laid out kind of the fundraising criteria that we have. A lot of our staff members specifically really like to suggest fundraising events that we should do, and a lot of the events are things that really wouldn't meet the agency's needs. So our staff are very aware, our program staff are very aware of how much money we need to raise every year. They are very aware of our budget. We're very transparent with cash flow. They know everything down to how many dollars a day it takes to run our office for every day it's open for the year. And so, suggesting things that are easy sounding, I should say, that might not be, have been kind of roadblocks in our strategic planning process at points, but we just keep reminding them what the reality is, and that kind of helps them get back on track. So one of the things that our program staff would love our events coordinator to spend all of her time on are all those restaurant deals in our community where you pick a night, you go, you give out flyers, and then anyone who passes in a flyer 10% of their meal will go to big brothers, big sisters. Well, for anyone who's ever done it, you know that you're not going to raise that much money, especially if they won't let you stand in the parking lot and pass out flyers during the event. So I tried it once when I arrived just for the sake of trying it. We did it at oh, I can't remember what they're called. The chickens. They sell barbecue chicken, Dave's, and we made a whopping $47. We had 2 staff members there for 4 hours talking to everybody, and we all can do the math. We know that's not a good use of time. But you know, staff members have a really hard time with that. They see the visibility, they feel like they're doing something, and for them, you know, it's a harder concept when they realize, well, you know, having you actually physically both be there, you going, we'd be better off if you just stayed home and we didn't do it and didn't make any money or spend any money. So we've set a cap for our staff to really help them think big, for the pun, sorry for the pun, but any new fundraising event that our agency does, we really need it to raise at least $20,000, or else it's not going to be meaningful for us. In our rural communities and our rural counties, we've set the minimum level at $5,000. So if a staff member is suggesting an idea that's lower than that, we can easily guide them back and say, you know, understand that a staff member's time is more valuable than some of your ideas you're presenting, but think bigger. Maybe there's something else that we can be doing. So that was kind of a long answer to both of those questions. If anyone else has any other responses to that, I don't see anything in the chat box, so feel free to contribute before I move on. All right. Well, Nicole, I think we'll just go to the next slide and wrap up this section about surveying and having guided conversations around the planning process. So the last component that I wanted to share, at least at this point, and I think there must be a way if you're not on a tablet or iPhone to, I know that Mary said that she was going to post some attachments. I had shared my agency's current strategic plan as well as the board survey that we're using to guide conversations at our board meetings this year. And so these questions are all on it. And if for some reason you can't access them, then we can certainly send them out after the call, or you can reach out directly. But for our board piece, this is one section on their survey, and it's around what they can contribute to us. So a great question that we asked, that we got a lot of great responses to, is how's the agency utilizing your strengths to provide effective services for children and youth? A lot of our board members have secret hidden talents that they don't even know they have until you create an opportunity for them to use it. One of our board members is extremely good at emceeing events, for example, and so just she fell into an opportunity to do that for us, kind of a last minute thing. Our MC that was supposed to do it backed out, and now we know that, like, she's a really great public speaker. But before, we didn't even know that about her, and she didn't even know that about herself. So you know, just asking that question, not just in this process, but ongoing with your board or volunteers or program champions, I think is extremely helpful. Also, what strengths could you offer to support the agency that are currently not being used? And then what development do you need as a board member to be an even stronger leader for our agency and to support, assist, and lead our strategic initiatives over the next 5 years? So the board is certainly invested in our strategic plan. They will have a lot of responsibilities coming out of this, as they do now with our current plan, that they're going to be accountable for. And so we want to make sure that they're prepared to lead the charge with our staff and other folks that we'll identify as we solidify what we're going to pick for the goals that we're going to be working on. And again, if you don't have a board, your advisory council, or the body of folks that supervises your program or oversees your program, same thing. So just making sure that they're involved too, and that they're asking questions to make sure that they understand that they do have a role in this plan, and executing it over the next 3 or 5 years, or whichever your time frame will be, I think is really crucial at this point. All right, so you've done all that. You've had all your conversations. You're feeling great. You have great data. You are starting to see some patterns. Different folks are suggesting the same things or have identified the same things for you. So hopefully all the conversations and discussions and surveying you're doing will make this next step really, really easy, which is establishing your goals for your plan. They could be short-term, long-term. They should be a manageable amount. I have worked with a few different programs where they have gotten really ambitious and have decided that they would like to work on 20 different goals in the next 3 years. Great, love that ambition. Obviously, it's for the kids, so you can't blame them for trying. But there's a lot of research out there that shows that an efficient agency or program really can't effectively focus on more than five big goals at a time. So there's a lot of research that says that. Sometimes the research says 4 goals, sometimes it says 3. I haven't really seen anything that says over 5. So you could come up with 5 really big goals and then lots of sub goals within, which are probably going to be your action steps. But that's fine. But just be really mindful. Keep it straightforward. Goals should be SMART, so they should be specific, measurable, actionable, reasonable, and timely. Just stick to that, and hopefully you will have some success. At Big Brothers Big Sisters of Northeast Iowa, in our current 3-year plan, we have 4, we call them pillars, but they're 4 big goals, and then we've broken them down into like smaller pieces to really help us crush the pillars, achieve the pillars. So our current 4 pillars are impact at scale, to build a sustainable program, to be intentional around our programming and making sure we're recruiting the right youth, mentors, families, funders, staff, et cetera, board, et cetera. And then leadership and partnership growth, making sure that all of our program champions have the skills they need, and then creating new partnerships. In that pillar, we've specifically identified schools. So that's been an area that we've been working on really hard the past 3 years. So you've established your goals. After that, you're going to start to outline your strategies. So these are the steps that you'll take to meet your goals. They're not quite the action steps yet, but they are, generally what you might do to start to achieve your goals, or what you need to do to start lining some things up. So that could look like connecting with current or prospect donors. You could be discussing goals with vendors. I think probably all of us are rocking some sort of in-kind donation somewhere, whether it's office space or printing, or donations for raffles that you might do at events, or during January, maybe some prizes for your mentors to appreciate them. So I think that, that all of us are probably doing that. We're probably really good at it. So you'd want to also do that during this process too. Maybe you're coming up with some goals that you might need the support of different vendors or companies in your area, and this is a really great, way to engage them. You'll want to research your competitors and or other threats identified in your SWOT analysis or any survey that comes up. Some of you know that I love GuideStar, and I look up other nonprofits in the counties that we serve, their 990s, and I can see the funding that they receive. And then on the other end, I can look up the foundations and trusts, also through GuideStar, and see what they're giving to people and the amounts. I can also pick up themes. So like 3 years ago when I was looking at our United Way and other private foundations in Black Hawk County, I noticed that a lot of the funding was starting to be given to literacy initiatives, and that's another reason why we decided that maybe we should really start Read to Succeed now and focus on literacy enhanced one-to-one mentoring now. It seems like the time is right. Obviously the funders love that, and other nonprofits are doing it too, so we blend in with them. We could collaborate with them. So that's what I mean when I say research. Maybe some of you also could share other things that you've done too, if you want to enter that in the chat box or share out loud. Also in this time, developing or formulating a development plan is part of outlining your strategies. Some of you are programs that are funded through school districts, so that conversation might look a little bit different than agencies that are independent. But still, if you have these great ideas that require additional resources, or maybe hiring like another staff member, or increasing your own hours, or increasing your own salary so you're invested to stay with your agency or program for another 3 years or 5 years during this planning process, that'll be a really important part. So development isn't just funding, as you know, it's a lot of different things. So making sure that you're really coming up with plans around developing your people, your resources, etc. Also, the tie in with that, outlining a marketing plan, how you're going to recruit either yourself, recruit for mentors, or recruit for your needs. So that will go hand in hand with strategies too. All right, and then we're almost we're almost at the end of the what you need to get started part. So creating an action plan is next, and sort of last of like the actually physically writing the strategic plan part and executing the strategic plan part. So an action plan is just what it says. It's really putting a process to your strategies that will help you reach your goals. So this should be a working document. It's really important for it to be easy to change and update. If you get a chance to look at Big Brothers Big Sisters of Northeast Iowa's sample plan, it is has been edited 3 times now, and we tracked it by different colors. So if you do get a chance to open it, and the keys on like the very first page, it says stuff that was written in 2015 is in black. So most of the plan is still black. And then things that were changed the following year at our board and staff and advisory council retreat, our annual meeting, are in red. And there's a lot of red in there because we did stay, for the most part, on the direction that we imagined for ourselves. But we had a lot of opportunities that came up a year and a half after I arrived here, mainly around funding and growth. And so we accomplished all of our goals in probably 3 to 6 months, and we needed to do something else. We needed to either keep going or make a commitment to maintain. And so a year later, our action steps and our action plan was flexible, so we were able to increase our goals very well or very easily. And so that's what that is. And then the green in the plan is what we changed in May last year to reflect our realities. So you'll see some of our goals we still were on the right path and achieved, and then others you'll see like, wow, they overshot. And that's okay. So every year we have a formal conversation around strategic plan and changes. Every month at our staff meetings, our board meetings, and our advisory council meetings, we always connect our agenda to the strategic plan to make sure that we're still moving in the direction, we're still connected to the plan. And it's easy for us to be able to tell if we're drifting, and it's easy for us to measure our goals because in our action plan, if it was meaningful and achievable. And so it's okay to adjust it. It's fine. I've met some programs and agencies out there that think that you're not supposed to change your plan once you create it. It's like set in stone. And I don't know where they got that from. Maybe I'm not an expert, like I said. Maybe that's really how it's supposed to be. But from what I've learned, it needs to be fluid to an extent, I would say. And then an action plan also should be really specific about what you're doing, when you'll do it, and then most importantly, who will actually be accountable, and then what resources will be needed, and how you're going to measure the action. If it's going to be, how will you know if you're successful? How will you know if you've completed it? You can check it off. If you look at our plan, you'll see that we have it broken out by board members' responsibilities and staff members' responsibilities. And when we do our 5-year plan, we now have we'll have 4 different advisory councils in July 2018, so they'll also get their own sections. We also have it broken into timelines in most of our areas. Some of our areas it's just ongoing, and we're just always working towards it. But whenever we could, we tried to break it down into numbers just so we could keep track if we're on a good pace or if we needed to change anything. So our goals I shared earlier that we've just not figured out recruitment of mentor, like diversifying our mentor recruiting. So you'll see that we set really, really simple goals for ourselves to make sure that we were able to feel like we were moving in a direction, but they're so low. So that's one area that I think would contrast our first section, which is talking about our growth and growing at scale and just constantly adjusting those. But for those, we had like specific month goals, like by December 2017, by May 2018. In other sections, it's just ongoing, but we hope to hit this number by the end of 2017, this number by the end of, et cetera. So does anyone want to share an example of either a goal, strategy, or action plan of what they're working on maybe now, or maybe what you're thinking about doing and you need a little bit of feedback? All right. Well, I'm not seeing anyone asking anything, so I'll keep going. I'm almost done with the presentation, and I'm just looking at the time now. Oh, look, Lynn Carroll. Let's see what she has to say. So Lynn Carroll wants to add services to a new area. So what about adding services to new areas? So have you come up with any action steps yet or strategies? I know just because I'm actually, nope, she hasn't. Thanks, Lynn. So I know she and I are working on a county that is between both of our service areas, and I think Lynn, like a great example of like what you're already doing that you can connect back to any expansion, whether you're thinking about this particular county or any others, is we're doing our research. We're going actually in front of a Kiwanis group that's pretty connected to the community, and they are one of the top funders in the community, so that was a really good strategy as well to pick them. And most of these Kiwanians have been in the club for a long, long time, like probably decades. I don't know when their club was founded, but I imagine most of them are probably founding members. And they're really invested, and most of them are former teachers or current teachers. So going to them and really engaging them and learning about the community needs from them, kind of doing like a mini community assessment, with the people that know the community the most. And that I think will help us identify if it's going to be realistic to try to expand, and do something there with them, do, a program there. If we're going to have to do school-based or community-based, just depending on barriers of people leaving for the day to work, going to a different county to work, or maybe the school isn't going to be open to the mentoring that we might be able to offer there, things like that. So I think that would be a great start. I know a lot of affiliates, and I think I've shared this too at some point in this presentation. Actually, maybe I haven't. They really try to raise money first before they would expand. So currently my agency is looking at expanding to a county north of us, and we already have commitments from funders if we decide to do it for the first 3 years that we're there. We don't have all the funding that we need, and we're still trying to figure out like an office location, and it's a really rural community, so we might have to have it in our future staff member's house. But you know what, that could be a first. That'll be a first for us, and uh, just looking at that, what that would mean. But a lot of programs and agencies would want to make sure that they have the funding raised first, and so that could be the conversation that you might have with some potential folks as you're doing that. But yeah, adding services to a new area, that's fantastic. I think that a few people on this call actually are thinking about doing that too. So feel free to share if you have any thoughts, or if you've had any best practices or pro tips for strategies that you've used so far. All right, well, I see that we have 6 minutes left, and there are only 3 more slides. So I think this is the first time that I'm probably not going to go over the hour. So thanks everyone so much for listening. I feel bad that not a lot of people shared anything out loud or chatted this time, comparatively speaking to other calls that I've done. But hopefully you're getting what you need out of it. And then I'm also available after the call too. Like, feel free to reach out. My contact information, I'll say it right before we disconnect. But getting back to the slides, so you've done it. You've written everything down. It's great. Everyone is celebrating. you have a great plan. You might have to make a couple tweaks. That's okay. So like, then what do you do with it? So many programs and agencies just give themselves a high five and shelve it. They just put it away, dust it off, whenever they're required to submit it with a grant, or when their national office asks for it every fall, or every spring in their audit, like Big Brothers Big Sisters does. That's not good. You spend so much time on it. You got to use this thing. So like I've been saying, be proud of your work. Shout it to the rooftops. What has worked for me, because our plan right now at least is 21 pages long. We've created a 1 to 2 page executive summary document that's really easy to share. It looks jazzy. There's graphics on it. It's in the Northeast Iowa's plan that you can see in the materials section. It's just kind of hidden in like the first, I think it's the 4th or 5th page, but it just says like executive summary and just lists out the 4 pillars and bullet points them all. That's been a really helpful document, especially for new staff as they get started with us and they're already reading so much. And new board members too, it's part of their onboarding process. They get the executive summary as part of their new board orientation packet. And so we just want to make sure it's easy for them to understand. They know what the key points are. Who else would you want to share it with? Well, we would share it with definitely funders. If you do your own annual report every year, I haven't seen the Joe Foundation's report recently, but last year's and the year before was really impressive, and they include it in there. I thought that was a really good idea, and it's like I don't know how to describe it. It's like a not a brochure. It's like a square, if I remember it correctly, and like opens up into 3 sections. So it was cool too, and it caught my eye. So they did a great job. They're a mentoring program too, the certified in Waterloo. So sharing with funders, sharing with everybody. I would throw a link in our newsletter, and I throw it up on Google Docs or our website, so everyone can take a look at it and really be impressed with the direction that we're going in. So definitely own it and share it around. And then don't forget about it. That's, again, don't shelve it. You spent so much time on this. And make sure that you're incorporating it into different meetings, whether it's your monthly or whenever you have them, staff meetings, group all staff, or one-on-one staff meetings. If you are a staff of one, don't let your supervisor forget about it. I know some of you're supervised by a superintendent or another school district employee, so they should definitely be aware of the plan, and you should be holding them accountable to it, just like they should be holding you accountable as well. And then your program champions, our bigs, they will receive our newsletters every month, and they'll see the progress that we're making on the plan. So making sure that our mentors are also connected to families, etc. If a new staff and board are starting with you, like I just mentioned, we incorporate it into our onboarding, and it seems to be really effective, and it's one of the first things I learn about, so it really tends to stick with them. Same with our advisory council members. Regularly measure and assess progress. We do this at our staff meetings monthly. We have our own scorecard. We do it at our board meetings monthly. We have scorecards for them that we've come up with. And our advisory councils, just last month, we created kind of a quasi scorecard for them. So everyone is never going to forget. At least the leaders at our agency will always have it in front of them. And we are constantly measuring against our goals and actual and same time last year, and just to keep ourselves accountable again. Celebrate victories, really important. There's a whole another hour we could probably do on how to appreciate your staff, yourself, your board, your volunteers. I would make this part of your celebration too. Adjusting areas of weakness or lack of progress will be very important to you. I don't know too many people's leadership styles where you create goals that are never attainable. I've never really met a leader that professed it's what they believed. So if you find that your plan was too far reaching or even too underwhelming, like I mentioned, the plan that we created when I first moved to Iowa 3 years ago, I thought at the time that we were creating really tough goals, and then we just our staff were so invested in the plan that they just crushed it. So we had to increase our goals or else we would just kind of be hanging on for 9 months until our retreat when we would formally adjust it again. Accountability is really important. At Big Brothers Big Sisters of Northeast Iowa, we've actually built the different pillars, the pieces of the strategic plan, and the different staff members that are responsible for it in their evaluation process. So at their 3-month anniversary with us, and then annually, it is part of their performance review. And that's really helped our staff again understand how important this is, and know that they are accountable. As our staff's grown in size, we've noticed that it is easier and easier for staff members to not hold themselves accountable because we're getting bigger and bigger, and it feels like we have a big staff now. We went from 4 to 18 in 2.5 years. So 2.5 years ago, those 4 staff definitely felt it every day if we weren't recruiting enough mentors or if we had a huge waiting list. And now, we're a little larger, so staff members can feel like they can hide if we're not reaching goals. No, they can't anymore. It's in all of our performance evaluations. There's no cookie cutter evaluation at our agency anymore. We have 9 different evals based on the job that you have. So if anyone's curious and seeing how we do that for those larger agencies on the phone, just feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to share that. And then lastly, before we end the call, is just be adaptable. It's okay if your plan does go off track a little bit. It shouldn't go off track completely, because then what's the point of having the plan? Now you're improvising again. But I think that, as a leader, you just have to kind of take it as it comes. We all know that funding is never a sure thing. We all know that staffing, while you'd love everyone to stick around who's a really strong staff member, they leave, you make bad hires, you got board member turnover, even though they commit to you, yeah, I'll be here 3 years, 6 years when you bring them on. Life changes, your life changes, things happen at the time when you're writing your plan. You might have more time than you think to incorporate it. And, maybe you new relationship, more children, you go back to school, you have less time to spend on working on the strategic plan. It's okay. Just know that it's okay, but don't just let it be. Come back to the table, have conversations again, and fix it so it's still a meaningful document for you. So I'm seeing that we're at 3:01. I'll stop talking now. The very, very last slide is just reminding everyone about our April 12th peer share call, which the topic is child abuse or ongoing mentor training, child abuse prevention. And also just a friendly reminder for everybody, about a month or so ago, we created an Iowa Mentoring Partnership group just for program staff, and it's a peer sharing tool that we hope that everyone will start to utilize for those easy questions. I've liked it a lot. We posted a couple questions about this call, and I got some really good feedback that helped me put together the slides for today. So if you have any easy questions or just want to meet some other people across the state that are from programs or agencies of like size or entity, that's a really great way to make those connections too. So I'm hearing people jumping off. So Nicole, do you have any final thoughts before we disconnect today? Oh, I think Nicole might be muted. So I guess I'll get the honor of saying goodbye. Thank you for everyone for participating. And if you need anything, feel free to reach out to me. My email address is my name. It's Katie, Katie .Orlando @iowabigs.org. And I'd be happy to share any resources that I've mentioned or anything else that you need ever. It doesn't have to be about strategic planning. I really see the value in peer sharing. So if you need anything at all, from like a program form to everything, I'm sure that at some point I've had one or I've created one for the programs that I've led. So don't be a stranger, and we hope to see you next month on April 12th. So have a great day, everybody.